A dying woman clutches a beggar's hand in a flooded alley, whispering one desperate plea, "Save my baby." He has nothing, not even a home. But in 10 minutes, he'll deliver a child who will connect him to the most powerful man in Lagos, the same man whose cruelty put him on these streets. The rain came down on Lagos like divine anger, turning the streets of Makoko into rivers of mud and garbage. Kunle sat under the rusted zinc overhang of an abandoned kiosk, his legs pulled tight to his chest, watching the water rise. He had been sleeping there for 3 weeks now, ever since Mama Chitty chased him from her corridor for failing to pay the 200 naira he owed for sleeping space. 200 naira. He almost laughed at the cruelty of it. There was a time when 200 naira meant nothing to him, when he would tip the parking attendants at his office building more than that just for watching his Mercedes. But that was before Chief Adeyemi destroyed everything. Kunle was 42 years old but looked 60. His face carried the kind of exhaustion that comes not from one bad day, but from years of them stacked on top of each other like the corrugated iron shacks that surrounded him. His clothes were donations from a church group, too big in some places and too small in others, and they smelled like the streets smelled, like humanity pressed too close together without enough water or dignity to wash it away. He had been an accountant once, a good one, working for one of the big construction firms in Victoria Island. He had a wife, Ngozi, and a daughter, Adiz, who was 6 years old and loved to sing. He had a life. Then Chief Adeyemi happened. The chief was the kind of man Lagos created in abundance, powerful and ruthless, with connections that stretched from the State House to the churches to the police barracks. He owned the construction company where Kunle worked, and when Kunle discovered that the chief was siphoning money from a government contract, money meant for building schools in the Niger Delta, Kunle made the mistake of thinking honesty mattered more than survival. He reported it. Not to the chief, because he was not stupid, but to the federal auditors, thinking they would care that children were being robbed of their futures. The auditors cared about their own futures more. Within a week, the files disappeared. Within 2 weeks, Kunle was accused of the very fraud he had reported. The chief had connections everywhere, witnesses who swore they saw Kunle taking bribes, bank accounts opened in his name that he had never seen before, filled with money he had never touched. Ngozi begged him to run, to leave Lagos, to disappear into the east where her family could hide them. But Kunle believed in the system. He hired a lawyer, went to court, told the truth. The judge was the chief's cousin. Kunle went to prison for 4 years. When he came out, Ngozi was gone. The neighbors said she had died, a fever that took her quickly, and Adiz had been sent to Ngozi's mother in Enugu. He tried to find them, but Ngozi's family wanted nothing to do with the man who had destroyed their daughter's life, the man whose pride had put him in prison while his wife sold everything they owned just to eat. He wrote letters. They were never answered. He traveled to Enugu once, spent his last money on the bus fare, but when he arrived at the family compound, Ngozi's brother met him at the gate with a machete and a simple message: "You are dead to us, do not come back." So Kunle returned to Lagos because he did not know where else to go, and Lagos swallowed him the way it swallowed everyone who had nothing left. He tried to find work, but his prison record followed him everywhere, and the few people who remembered him from before remembered only that Chief Adeyemi had destroyed him, which meant he was untouchable. No one crossed the chief. No one helped his enemies. Kunle learned to beg, first with shame and then without it, because shame was a luxury hunger could not afford. The rain was getting worse. Kunle could hear it hammering on the zinc above him, could see it turning the narrow path between the shacks into a flowing stream. People were running past, trying to get home before the flood came, mothers carrying children on their backs, young men dragging plastic bags full of whatever they owned. Kunle stayed where he was. He had nowhere to run to, and the overhang was better than nothing. That was when he heard the scream. It was high and sharp, cutting through the sound of the rain, a woman's voice filled with pain and terror. Kunle looked up. The scream came again, closer now, from somewhere in the maze of shacks just beyond where he sat. Most people would have ignored it because Makoko was full of screams, full of pain that was not your business if you wanted to survive. But Kunle had lost the instinct for self-preservation somewhere between the prison cell and the streets, and the sound pulled at something in him that he thought had died with Ngozi. He stood up, his joints protesting, and moved toward the sound. The water was ankle-deep now, filled with things he did not want to think about, and the rain was so heavy he could barely see 5 feet ahead. He followed the screaming, turning down a narrow alley between two shacks that leaned against each other like drunken friends. The alley was flooding fast, and at the end of it, he saw her. She was young, maybe 25, lying on her side in the mud and water, her wrapper soaked through and her face twisted in agony. Her belly was huge, and even from where Kunle stood, he could see the contractions rippling across it. She was in labor, and she was alone. "Please," she gasped when she saw him, reaching out one hand. "Please help me. The baby is coming." Kunle's first thought was to run, to find someone else, someone who knew what to do, because he was just a beggar and this woman needed a doctor, needed a hospital, needed anything but him. But there was no time. The woman screamed again, her body arching, and Kunle saw the blood mixing with the rainwater around her legs. "Where is your family?" he shouted over the rain. "Where is your husband?" "No husband," she cried. "No family here. Please, the baby, I can feel the baby." Kunle knelt beside her, the water soaking through his already wet clothes, and for a moment he was paralyzed by the impossibility of what was happening. He knew nothing about delivering babies. He was a beggar, a failed accountant, a man who could not even save himself. But the woman grabbed his hand with surprising strength, her eyes locking onto his, and in them he saw something he recognized. Desperation. The kind that comes when you have reached the end of everything and there is no one else. "What is your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Zainab," she gasped. "My name is Zainab." "Okay, Zainab. My name is Kunle. I am going to help you." He had no idea how he was going to help her, but he said it anyway because that was what she needed to hear. He looked around desperately, but the alley was empty. Everyone had gone inside to escape the flood. They were alone, just him and this woman and the baby that was determined to be born in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. "I need to see," he said. "I need to see if the baby is coming." Zainab nodded, her teeth clenched against the pain, and Kunle gently moved her wrapper aside. He had helped Ngozi when Adiz was born, had been there in the hospital holding her hand, but this was different. This was chaos. The baby's head was already crowning, visible between Zainab's legs, and there was so much blood that Kunle's hands began to shake. "The baby is coming now," he said. "When the next contraction comes, you have to push. Do you understand? You have to push as hard as you can." Zainab nodded, her breathing coming in short gasps, and then the contraction hit and she screamed and pushed and Kunle found himself doing things he did not know he knew how to do, supporting the baby's head, telling Zainab to breathe, to push again, to hold on. The rain poured down on them, washing away the blood as fast as it came, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Kunle stopped thinking about what he could not do and focused only on what he had to do. The baby came all at once, sliding into Kunle's hands with a rush of fluid and blood, tiny and slippery and absolutely silent. For one terrible moment, Kunle thought the baby was dead, but then he remembered something, some fragment of knowledge from a lifetime ago, and he turned the baby over and rubbed its back, gently but firmly. The baby jerked, coughed, and then let out a thin, angry wail that was the most beautiful sound Kunle had ever heard. "It's a girl," he said, his voice breaking. "Zainab, you have a daughter." He placed the baby on Zainab's chest, and the young woman wrapped her arms around the tiny creature, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain. Kunle sat back in the water, his hands shaking, his heart pounding, unable to believe what had just happened. He had delivered a baby. In a flooding alley in Makoko, with nothing but his bare hands and desperation, he had brought a life into the world. But Zainab was still bleeding, too much, and her skin was turning pale. Kunle knew enough to know that this was bad, that she needed help he could not give her. "We need to get you to a hospital," he said. "Can you walk?" Zainab shook her head weakly. "No hospital. No money. They will not take me. They have to take you. You just had a baby. They cannot turn you away." But even as he said it, Kunle knew it was a lie. He had seen the hospitals turn people away, had stood outside the gates himself once when he was sick with malaria, watching as the guards refused entry to anyone who could not pay the admission fee. This was Lagos. Everything cost something. He made a decision. He scooped Zainab up, baby and all, ignoring the pain in his back and the weakness in his legs, and he carried her out of the alley, through the flooded streets, toward the main road where he might find a taxi or a kiki or anyone who could help. She was light, too light, and the baby wailed against her chest, and Kunle walked through the rain like a man possessed, because for the first time in years, he had something to fight for that was not himself. People stared as he passed, this mad beggar carrying a woman and a newborn through a flood, but no one helped. That was Lagos too. You did not get involved in other people's problems. But Kunle did not care anymore. He kept walking until he reached the main road, and there, miracle of miracles, he saw a Kiki Napep pulled over under a tree, the driver smoking a cigarette and waiting for the rain to ease. "Please," Kunle gasped, "this woman needs a hospital. She just had a baby. Please, she is bleeding." The driver looked at Zainab, at the baby, at Kunle's desperate face, and for a moment Kunle thought he would refuse. But then the driver threw away his cigarette and nodded. "Get in. There is a clinic in Oberland. I will take you." Kunle climbed into the back of the Kiki, cradling Zainab and the baby, and as they pulled away from a cocoa, racing through the flooded streets with the rain still pouring down, he looked down at the woman in his arms and the child she held, and he thought, this is what redemption feels like. The clinic in Oberland was a small building painted a fading yellow, with rusty metal bars on the windows and a generator coughing black smoke into the rain-soaked air. Kunle carried Zainab through the entrance, water dripping from his clothes onto the cracked linoleum floor, and a nurse in a stained uniform looked up from her desk with a kind of exhaustion that suggested she had seen everything and been impressed by none of it. "She just had a baby," Kunle said, his voice hoarse. "In the street. She is bleeding. Please help her." The nurse stood, her eyes moving quickly over Zainab's pale face and the blood-soaked wrapper, and her professional detachment cracked just slightly. "Bring her to the back. Dr. Okoro, we have an emergency." They took Zainab from his arms and disappeared through a doorway, and Kunle stood there in the middle of the waiting room, suddenly empty-handed and useless. The baby's cries faded as they carried her away with her mother, and Kunle sank onto one of the plastic chairs that lined the wall, his legs finally giving out. His hands were still covered in blood, Zainab's blood, the baby's blood, and he stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. The Kiki driver appeared beside him. "You have money for the fare?" Kunle looked up at him, and the driver must have seen something in his face because he sighed and waved his hand. "Forget it. Go and wash your hands. There is a tap outside." Kunle nodded, unable to speak, and stumbled outside to the tap in the clinic's small compound. He washed his hands under the cold water, watching the blood spiral away into the drain, and then he washed his face and his arms and stood there letting the rain fall on him because he did not know what else to do. The adrenaline that had carried him through the last hour was draining away, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that made his bones ache. When he went back inside, the nurse was waiting for him. "The doctor has stabilized her. She lost a lot of blood, but she will survive. The baby is healthy. You saved their lives." Kunle nodded, the words not quite reaching him through the fog in his head. "Can I see them?" "In a little while. The doctor is still with her." "You are family?" "No. I found her. In Makoko. She was alone." The nurse studied him, taking in his ragged clothes and the smell of the street that clung to him despite the rain. "You delivered the baby yourself?" "Yes." "Then you are a brave man. Or a foolish one. Sit. Rest. I will call you when you can see her." Kunle sat, and the waiting began. The clinic was busy despite the late hour, full of people with malaria and coughs and the injuries that came from living too many people in too small a space. A woman sat across from him with a child who would not stop crying, and an old man with a bandaged hand muttered to himself in Yoruba, and the fluorescent lights overhead flickered and buzzed like dying insects. Kunle closed his eyes and saw Zainab's face, saw the terror in it, and then he saw Ngozi's face, from all those years ago when Adiz was born, and the two images blurred together until he could not tell them apart. He must have dozed because when the nurse touched his shoulder, he jerked awake with a gasp. You can see them now. Follow me. She led him down a narrow hallway to a small room with 2 beds. Zainab lay in one of them, and 4 dripped running into her arm, the baby swaddled in a thin blanket beside her. She looked better, some color returned to her face, and when she saw Kunle, she smiled weakly. You came back, she said. Of course. Kunle approached the bed slowly, looking down at the baby. She was sleeping now, her tiny face peaceful, and Kunle felt something twist in his chest. How do you feel? Like I was hit by a Danfo bus. But alive. Because of you. Zainab's eyes filled with tears. The doctor said if you had not brought me here, I would have died. Me and my daughter both. How can I thank you for that? Kunle shook his head. You do not need to thank me. I just did what anyone would do. No, Zainab said firmly. Not anyone. Most people would have walked past. I know because people have been walking past me for months. You are different. Kunle did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He looked at the baby instead, at her tiny fingers curled into fists, at the way her chest rose and fell with each breath. Life was such a fragile thing, he thought. It could be destroyed so easily, and yet here it was, persisting anyway. What will you name her? He asked. Zainab was quiet for a moment. Amina. It means trustworthy, faithful. Because I have to trust that God will take care of us now, even though I have no idea how. Where is your family, Zainab? The baby's father. Her expression hardened. The father is gone. He was a man who made promises he did not keep, and when I told him I was pregnant, he gave me money for an abortion and disappeared. I could not do it. I could not kill my baby. So I kept her, and my family disowned me. My father is a pastor, and he said I brought shame to the family. He told me to leave and never come back. Kunle understood that kind of rejection, the way families could turn their backs when you needed them most. So you came to Lagos. I came to Lagos because I thought I could find work, make a life for me and my baby. But no one wants to hire a pregnant woman with no experience and no connections. I was staying with a friend in Makoko, but when the labor started, she was not there. She had gone to the market. I tried to wait, but the pain was too much, and I was scared, and I went outside to try to find help, and that is when... She trailed off, her hand reaching for the baby. That is when you found me. What will you do now? Zainab looked at him with eyes that held no answers. I do not know. I have no money. The clinic will let me stay for a day or 2, but then I have to leave. I cannot go back to Makoko. My friend will not want a baby crying in her small room. And I cannot go home. Kunle felt the weight of her helplessness because it mirrored his own. He wanted to help her, to tell her everything would be fine, but he had nothing to give. He was a beggar. He could barely keep himself alive. What could he possibly do for a woman and a newborn baby? I will think of something, he said, knowing it was hollow but unable to offer nothing. Zainab smiled sadly. You have already done enough. More than enough. Go home. Rest. You look like you need it. Kunle did not tell her that he had no home to go to, that his rest would be under the zinc overhang in Makoko if the flood had not washed it away. He just nodded and turned to leave, but Zainab called after him. Kunle, before you go, there is something I need to tell you. About my family. He turned back. What about them? My father's name is Chief Adeyemi. He is a chief, a very powerful man in Lagos. But he is also a very hard man, and when he cuts someone off, it is forever. I tell you this so you understand why I cannot go back to him, why I would rather die in the street than ask him for help. He made his choice, and I made mine. The name hit Kunle like a physical blow. Chief Adeyemi. The same man who had destroyed his life, who had sent him to prison, who had taken everything from him. And this woman, this girl he had just saved, was that man's daughter. He must have made some sound because Zainab looked at him with concern. Are you all right? Do you know my father? Kunle forced his face into something neutral, forced his voice to stay steady. "No. I have heard the name, that is all. Everyone in Lagos knows Chief Adeyemi." It was not quite a lie. Everyone did know the chief. But Kunle knew him in ways that Zainab could not imagine, knew him as the architect of his destruction. And now here he was, standing beside the chief's daughter and grandchild, having saved their lives. The irony was so sharp it cut. "I should go," Kunle said. "Take care of yourself, Zainab. Take care of Amina." He left before she could say anything else, walking out of the clinic into the night where the rain had finally stopped, leaving the air thick and humid and smelling of wet earth. His mind was spinning. Of all the people in Lagos, of all the millions of souls struggling to survive, he had found the daughter of the man who had ruined him. What were the odds? What kind of cosmic joke was this? Kunle walked through the empty streets, his feet carrying him nowhere in particular, and he thought about revenge. He could go to Chief Adeyemi, tell him that his daughter was in a clinic in Oberland, vulnerable and alone. He could watch the old man squirm, could demand money in exchange for the information, could finally get something back from the man who had taken everything. The thought was seductive in its simplicity. But then he thought about Zainab's face, about the way she had looked at him with gratitude and trust, and he thought about baby Amina, who had done nothing to deserve being born into this mess. And he thought about the kind of man he used to be, before prison, before the streets, when he still believed that doing the right thing mattered. He was still that man, he realized. The streets had not killed that part of him, no matter how much they had tried. He could not betray Zainab, could not use her suffering as a weapon against her father, because that would make him no better than the chief himself. Revenge was a luxury he could not afford, not if it meant becoming the very thing he hated. Kunle found himself back in Makoko as dawn broke over the lagoon, painting the water pink and gold. The flood had receded, leaving behind a layer of mud and debris that would take days to clean. His zinc overhang was still there, and he sat down beneath it, exhausted beyond measure. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but all he could see was Zainab's face and Amina's tiny hands and the impossible tangle of fate that had brought them into his life. He had saved the daughter of his enemy. Now he had to decide what that meant, and whether mercy was stronger than the hunger for justice that had kept him going through 4 years in a cell and 3 years on the streets. The answer should have been simple. But nothing in Lagos was ever simple, and Kunle knew that this was just the beginning of something he did not yet understand. 3 days passed before Kunle returned to the clinic. He told himself it was just a check on Zainab and the baby, to make sure they were recovering, nothing more. But the truth was more complicated, tangled up with thoughts he could not quite organize and feelings he had believed were dead. He had spent those 3 days begging at the bus stop in Oberland, collecting enough money to buy a small bag of rice and some groundnuts, and when he walked into the clinic on the 4th day, he carried these offerings like a man bringing gifts to a shrine. The nurse recognized him. The beggar who delivered a baby in the rain. "You have come to see Zainab." "Yes." "Is she still here?" The nurse's expression softened slightly. "She is. The doctor wanted to discharge her yesterday, but she has nowhere to go. We are a clinic, not a charity home. We cannot keep her forever." Kunle nodded and walked to Zainab's room. She was sitting up in bed, nursing Amina, and when she saw him, her face lit up with genuine happiness that made Kunle's chest tighten. "Kunle, I was hoping you would come back. Look, Amina is feeding well. The doctor says she is strong." Kunle set the rice and groundnuts on the small table beside the bed. "I brought you something. It is not much, but—" Zainab's eyes filled with tears. "You brought me food. With what money? Kunle, you should not have. You need it more than I do. You just had a baby. You need to eat to make milk. Take it." She took it, holding the small bag as if it were treasure, and Kunle saw how thin she had become, how her collarbones jutted out sharply above the neckline of the hospital gown they had given her. She had been starving even before the birth, he realized. Trying to survive on nothing. "The nurse says they want to discharge you," Kunle said. "Where will you go?" Zainab's smile faded. "I do not know. I have been thinking about it for 3 days, and I still do not know. I cannot go back to my friend's place. She has already made that clear. She sent a message saying the room is too small for a baby. And I cannot. She stopped, looking down at Amina. I cannot go to my father. I would rather die. Kunle understood that pride, that refusal to bend even when breaking seemed inevitable. It was the same pride that had kept him from begging Ngozi's family for help, the same pride that had put him in prison in the first place. Pride was expensive, but sometimes it was all you had left. What about the baby's father? Kunle asked, though he already knew the answer. He made his choice. I will not chase a man who does not want his own child. Zainab shifted Amina to her other breast, wincing slightly. I will find a way. Maybe I can go to Ajagunle, find a small room, look for work. People say there are factories there that hire anyone. You cannot work in a factory with a newborn baby. Then I will beg. Like you do. You survive, do you not? I can learn. The determination in her voice was admirable and heartbreaking at the same time. Kunle looked at this young woman, barely more than a girl really, cast out by her family and abandoned by her baby's father, and he saw himself reflected in her stubbornness. But he also saw the difference. He was alone. She had Amina to protect. That changed everything. Listen to me, Kunle said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear me. Begging is not life. It is survival, barely, and it will break you in ways you cannot imagine. You cannot do that with a baby. You will lose her. To disease, to hunger, to the streets themselves. I have seen it happen. Then what am I supposed to do? Zainab's voice rose with desperation. Tell me, Kunle, what choice do I have? Kunle was quiet for a long moment. He had been wrestling with this question for 3 days, ever since he learned who she was, turning it over in his mind like a stone he could not put down. Now he made his decision. You have to go to your father. Zainab's face hardened. No. I told you I cannot. He will not take me back. And even if he would, I will not crawl to him. He chose his reputation over his daughter. He chose his pride over his grandchild. I will not forgive that. I am not asking you to forgive him. I am asking you to use him. Go to him, not as a daughter begging for mercy, but as a mother demanding what is owed to your child. He is a rich man. One of the richest in Lagos. He can provide for Amina even if he will not provide for you. Do not think of it as surrender. Think of it as warfare. You take what your daughter needs and you give him nothing in return, not your love, not your respect, nothing. Just his money. Zainab stared at him, and Kunle could see the war happening behind her eyes, pride battling against practicality, anger wrestling with fear. You do not understand. My father is not a man who can be used. He is the one who uses people. If I go to him, he will take Amina from me. He will say I am unfit, that I have no husband, no home, no way to care for her. He will give her to his wife, my stepmother, and I will never see her again. Kunle had not considered this, but as soon as she said it, he knew she was right. Chief Adeyemi was exactly that kind of man, the kind who would see a grandchild as property to be controlled, not a life to be nurtured. The chief would take the baby and cast Zainab aside like garbage, and there would be nothing she could do about it because the law favored men like him, rich men with connections and power. Then you need leverage, Kunle said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. You need something he wants more than he wants to punish you. What could I possibly have that my father wants? He already has everything. His reputation. His image. Chief Adeyemi is a man who cares very much about what people think of him. I know this because... Kunle stopped himself, nearly revealing too much. I know this because everyone knows this. He is always in the newspapers, always at church, always making speeches about family values and morality. What would happen if people knew he had cast out his own daughter and grandchild? If it became a scandal? Zainab's eyes widened. You want me to blackmail my own father? I want you to survive. And I want Amina to have a chance at life. If that means making your father uncomfortable, then yes. You go to him, and you tell him that unless he provides for you and the baby, unless he gives you a home and money and everything you need to raise her, you will go to every newspaper in Lagos and tell them your story. The pastor's daughter, pregnant and abandoned, her father turning his back on her in her hour of need. The bloggers would love it. It would destroy him. Zainab was shaking her head, but Kunle could see that she was thinking about it, considering the possibility. He would never believe I would do it. He knows I am too proud. Then you have to make him believe it. You have to be willing to burn everything down if that is what it takes to protect your daughter. Can you do that? She looked down at Amina, who had finished nursing and was sleeping peacefully against her chest, oblivious to the adult troubles swirling around her. When Zainab looked back up, her eyes were hard. Yes. If it means my daughter eats, if it means she has a roof over her head and a chance to go to school and not end up like me, yes. I can do it. I will do it. Kunle felt something shift in his chest, a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. He was helping her, yes, but he was also using her, just a little, to strike at the man who had destroyed his life. If Chief Adeyemi's daughter publicly confronted him, if she exposed his hypocrisy, it would wound the chief in ways that Kunle never could alone. It was not quite revenge, but it was something. When you go to him, Kunle said, you need to be strong. Do not cry, do not beg. Walk in there like you own the place, and tell him exactly what you want and exactly what will happen if he refuses. And do not go alone. Take a witness. Who? I have no one. Take me. Zainab looked at him in surprise. You? Why would you do this for me? Because your father took everything from me, and I want to see his face when his sins come home to roost, Kunle thought. But what he said was, because someone needs to. And because I have nothing to lose. If your father throws me out, so what? I am already on the streets. But you need someone beside you, someone who will not be intimidated. I can be that person. Zainab studied his face for a long moment, and Kunle wondered what she saw there, whether she could sense the darkness underneath his kindness. But then she nodded. Okay. If you are willing, then yes. I would be grateful to have you with me. They made a plan. Kunle would find out where Chief Adeyemi lived, his work schedule, the best time to catch him. Zainab would practice what she would say, how she would stand, how she would present herself not as a supplicant but as an equal demanding justice. It would take a few days to prepare, and in the meantime, Kunle used his begging money to extend Zainab's stay at the clinic, just a little longer, just enough time to get ready. As Kunle left the clinic that day, he felt alive in a way he had not felt in years. He had a purpose beyond survival, a mission that mattered. He was going to walk into Chief Adeyemi's house and watch the man squirm. He was going to help Zainab take back her power and give baby Amina a future. And in doing so, he was going to prove that the streets had not destroyed him, that he was still capable of more than just existing. But underneath the excitement was a whisper of doubt. What would happen when Zainab discovered the truth, that Kunle was not just a kind stranger but a man with his own vendetta against her father? Would she still trust him? Would she still want his help? Or would she see him for what he really was, someone using her pain to serve his own hunger for retribution? Kunle pushed the questions away. He would deal with that when the time came. For now, he had work to do. He had to find the chief's address, had to scout the compound, had to make sure everything was perfect. Because there would be only one chance at this, and he could not afford to fail. Chief Adeyemi's house was in Ikoyi, behind high walls topped with broken glass and electric wire, guarded by armed security men who looked at Kunle like he was something they might scrape off their shoes. The compound was enormous, with manicured lawns and fountains and imported cars parked in a driveway that could fit 10 of the shacks in Makoko. Kunle stood across the street, watching the gates, and felt the old familiar rage building in his chest. This was where his money had gone, the money stolen from school contracts, the money that was supposed to build futures for children in the Niger Delta. It had built this palace instead, this monument to corruption and greed. He had spent 2 days learning the chief's routine. The man left for work at 8 in the morning, returned at 6 in the evening, attended church on Sundays. He had a wife, the stepmother Zainab had mentioned, and 2 younger children, a boy and a girl. The family looked perfect in the photographs Kunle found online, smiling for cameras at charity events and political rallies. No one would guess that this pillar of the community had abandoned his own daughter. Today was Sunday. The chief would be home all day, which meant it was the perfect time to strike. Kunle walked back to the clinic, where Zainab was waiting, dressed in the cleanest clothes Kunle had been able to buy for her from the second-hand market. She looked terrified and determined at the same time, holding Amina wrapped in a new blanket, and when she saw Kunle, she straightened her shoulders. "I am ready," she said. "Let us go before I lose my nerve." They took a taxi to Ikoyi, Kunle paying with the last of the money he had saved. The driver looked at them curiously, this beggar and this young woman with a baby, heading to one of the richest neighborhoods in Lagos, but he said nothing. Money was money, and he drove them to the chief street and let them out a block away from the compound. They walked to the gates, and the security man stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "What is your business here?" Zainab lifted her chin. "I am here to see Chief Adeyemi. I am his daughter." The security man's eyes widened slightly, and he spoke into his radio. There was a long pause, voices crackling back and forth, and then the gate swung open. "You can go in. But you," he pointed at Kunle, "you stay here." "He comes with me," Zainab said firmly. "Or I do not go in at all." The security man looked uncertain, but then a voice called from the house, sharp and commanding. "Let them both in. I want to see what kind of circus my daughter has brought to my door." They walked up the long driveway, past the fountains and the flowers, and Kunle felt his heart pounding in his chest. He was about to face the man who had destroyed his life, the man he had dreamed of confronting for 7 years. But this was not about him. This was about Zainab and Amina. He had to remember that. Chief Adeyemi stood on the veranda, a large man in an embroidered agbada, his face hard and unreadable. He was older than Kunle remembered, his hair grayer, but his eyes were the same, cold and calculating. He looked at Zainab without any trace of warmth, and then his gaze moved to Kunle, and for just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Confusion. It was gone too quickly to tell. "So," the chief said, "the prodigal daughter returns. And she brings a beggar with her. How appropriate." Zainab did not flinch. "I am not here to return, father. I am here to make a business arrangement." The chief laughed, a harsh sound. "A business arrangement? You stand on my doorstep with a bastard child and a street rat, and you talk about business. This should be entertaining. Come inside. I do not need the neighbors to hear this nonsense." They followed him into a sitting room that was larger than some houses Kunle had seen, filled with leather furniture and expensive art. The chief sat down heavily in an armchair and gestured for them to sit. Zainab sat, but Kunle remained standing, positioning himself slightly behind her, a silent presence. "Speak then," the chief said. "What do you want? Money. Is that why you have come, to beg for money like your companion here?" "I want what is owed to my daughter," Zainab said, her voice steady despite the trembling Kunle could see in her hands. "She is your granddaughter. She deserves a home, education, a future. I want you to provide for her." "And why would I do that? You disgraced this family. You got pregnant by some worthless man, refused to do the sensible thing and fix your mistake, and now you expect me to clean up after you. I expect you to take responsibility for your blood. Amina is an Adeyemi, whether you like it or not." The chief's face darkened. "That child is no Adeyemi. She is a bastard, born out of wedlock, and I want nothing to do with her. You made your choice, Zainab. You chose shame over family. Now you live with the consequences." Zainab stood up, and Kunle saw the transformation happen, saw her fear burn away and leave behind pure steel. "Then I will make another choice, father. I will go to every newspaper, every blog, every social media page in Lagos, and I will tell them my story. The great Chief Adeyemi, the man who preaches about family values, who gives speeches about morality, who takes photos with orphans for publicity, this man threw out his own daughter and grandchild. I will show them pictures of Amina. I will tell them how I gave birth in a flooded alley because I had nowhere else to go, and I will watch your reputation burn to the ground. The chief's expression did not change, but Kunle saw his hands tighten on the arms of his chair. You would not dare. You are bluffing. Try me. I have nothing left to lose. You already took everything. My home, my family, my name. What more can you take? But I can take something from you. Your image. Your political career. Everything you have built on lies and stolen money. At those last words, the chief's eyes snapped to Kunle, and this time there was no mistaking the recognition. You, he said slowly. I know you. Kunle Okonkwo, the accountant who tried to destroy me. I sent you to prison. Kunle felt Zainab stiffen beside him, felt her turn to look at him, but he kept his eyes on the chief. Yes. You sent me to prison for a crime you committed. You stole from children, and when I tried to expose you, you destroyed my life. You. Zainab's voice was barely a whisper. You know my father. You have history with him. Kunle finally looked at her, and he saw the betrayal dawning in her eyes. Yes. I should have told you. I am sorry. The chief laughed again, and this time there was genuine amusement in it. Oh, this is beautiful. My daughter has found herself a partner in her beggar, and he happens to be an old enemy of mine. Tell me, Okonkwo, was this your plan all along? To use my daughter to get revenge? No, Kunle said, and it was the truth, or at least part of it. I helped her because she needed help. Because I was there when no one else was. What happened after, the plan to come here, that was about giving Amina a chance. But I will not lie. I am glad to see you uncomfortable. I am glad to watch you squirm. Zainab stood frozen between them, her eyes moving from her father to Kunle and back again, and Kunle could see her trying to process this revelation, trying to figure out who to trust. He had betrayed her, in a way, by not telling her the whole truth. But he had also saved her life, and that had to count for something.